Hello and welcome back to That AuDHD Teacher. If you're new here, I am Emily. I'm late diagnosed AuDHD as well as a teacher, and I'm sort of navigating life after diagnosis and making sense of the things I've kind of been wondering about. So, over the last few episodes, we've really been unpacking different parts of the AuDHD experience. We've talked about what AuDHD is, we've talked about the signs that were there that maybe were missed, masking, exhaustion, burnout, and executive functioning. So, today I wanted to talk about another one of those huge moments that I'm sure other people experience a lot too, and that is rejection sensitivity. So, if you don't know what rejection sensitivity is, it's basically an intense emotional reaction to perceived or actual rejection, but it can also be criticism, exclusion, or failure. Rejection sensitivity can be commonly referred as rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and it's not actually a diagnosis on its own, but it is something that a lot of people, particularly with ADHD, experience as well as autism. And this is one of those concepts that took me a while to sort of unpack. So I will try and share some examples of that as well, because I feel like once you hear the examples, you're then able to make that connection a lot easier and understand how it actually manifests in your own life. It's also worth mentioning that it's definitely not isolated to just ADHD and autism. I only use those examples because that's what I am diagnosed with. But there are a lot of other people in the neurodivergent community who also have rejection sensitivity. Just a little explanation about how RSD can be explained is the feeling when something happens, doesn't matter how small it is, where your emotional response feels a lot bigger than it should be for the situation. It can be something as small as a change in the tone of voice. It can be someone not replying to a text message or email, or you might just get a small piece of feedback and your brain just goes into complete overdrive. You may be able to relate to the feeling of when something happens, big or small, you sitting there just ruminating over and over again, what did I do wrong? Is this person upset with me? Like, have I ruined this? Do they not like me anymore? All of those things. And the thing that actually makes this worse is that logically, deep down, we know that there could be so many other explanations for it. We know logically that you cannot tell the tone via a text message, for example, or we know that people might just be busy, but emotionally, it still feels so painful. This is one of the things that I've experienced for my entire life, and I can't believe it took me 28 years to get my diagnosis to then figure out that rejection sensitivity is a thing, and I wasn't just going crazy, and I wasn't just completely emotional and too sensitive. It's also one of the experiences that I had that I thought was just like a me thing. I thought it was a personality flaw or maybe just part of anxiety. And I definitely do have anxiety, but I was misdiagnosed with an anxiety disorder when I was younger. And I'm not saying that that's completely wrong, but I have anxiety associated with being neurodivergent. So it's just slight difference. It's really hard when you actually think it's a personal failure because I thought that maybe I just cared too much or I was overreacting and that I needed to get a tougher skin, especially because I grew up in the world of being a competitive dancer. I think it was very normal to just suck it up and get a tough skin. And I thought I was just too weak. I just had no idea that the way I was reacting was just because of the way that my brain processed emotions. Had I understood that, it would have been a lot different, I think. But I do think no matter what your background is, this is a really, really common experience for a lot of AuDHD adults as well. I think that we spend so much time comparing our internal experience with other people's external experience. And I am definitely guilty of this because sometimes I would just see people sometimes I would just see people cope with these really major things and just carry on with their day. Whereas if it was me over something really small, I would just completely lose it. I always wondered, like, why do I do this? Why can't I just be like them? Why am I still thinking about this hours later? But the reality is that my brain was processing the experience very differently. Before I go into some of the examples, I just want to talk about some of the common presentations of rejection sensitivity. One of the things that you might be doing is being really hypervigilant. So basically, you are always continuously over analyzing social interactions, even if they are past social interactions, and you're just endlessly scanning for signs of disapproval or any rejection, whether that's actually real or imagined. That's something I do all the time. I am working so hard on it, but I tell you, it's going to be one that takes years and years of practice, I think. Another really common one is people pleasing. So basically, going to extreme lengths to accommodate other people just to guarantee that validation and safety for yourself. I know a lot of people do this. Another common one is perfectionism, because if you work tirelessly to ensure that there are no flaws, nobody will have a reason to criticize you. So that's one of the reasons that that kind of pops up. Another common thing could be just alleviating the risk of it altogether. So if you don't try if you don't try new things, like try a new hobby or apply for a new job or pursue a new relationship, you will be able to eliminate that possibility of no. So you might just avoid those things altogether. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I do all of these things, don't worry, me too. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is the connection between rejection sensitivity and masking. It relates so closely to masking, because if you have spent your entire life feeling like you don't quite fit, you can become so incredibly focused on avoiding rejection. So you learn to monitor yourself, you learn exactly how to respond to people, and you just learn the rules around you and what is expected by other people because it feels safer. And that version of you is a lot less likely to be criticized. You're also a lot less likely to stand out or upset someone. And basically, that's just because your brain has learned somewhere along the way that if you can just get everything right, then maybe you're not going to experience rejection. And so that's the pattern that we keep recreating. But the problem with this is that perfection doesn't actually exist. If you're spending all of your energy constantly trying to avoid any form of rejection, it's going to be incredibly exhausting. And we all know that masking is exhausting as well. So it's just like double whammy. And you're spending so much effort trying to avoid one thing when actually it just can't be avoided, because there are things that are going to happen in life and we are going to have an emotional reaction to it. The thing is, our brain is going to react the way that it's going to react. Of course, there are things you can do. There are lots of different strategies, and obviously, therapy and all of that is really helpful. But at the end of the day, it is just a difference in your brain and how it processes emotions. So, obviously, as neurodivergent people, we often feel emotions at very full volume. So that doesn't always mean negative emotions. That can be positive emotions as well. We can experience lots of excitement and passion. Emotions are just very big. We all know those intense positive emotions, and it can be a lot. Also means that the difficult emotions are also very intense. Those things can become really overwhelming. And I know for me, when something hurts, it really, really hurts. And I think that this is something that is misunderstood a lot by other people around us, because they might see a reaction to something and think, why are you still upset about this? Like, just move on. If it were that easy, it would happen. Trust me. The thing is, the person experiencing that emotion and that intensity isn't choosing to feel it. It's the feeling, their feeling and their experience is real to them. And quite often we have other people telling us to just stop feeling, but we actually need help to process what we are feeling instead. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, it's good to know, but what do I even do about it? There are some strategies you can use. Again, therapy, great. And one thing that I am working on a lot in therapy at the moment is separating my thoughts from actual facts. And we dig out a lot of evidence. And quite often there is no evidence for the thoughts. I guess that's where learning to separate feelings from facts kind of come in. There is a difference, because feelings are not always facts. You can feel like you're rejected without actually being rejected. In those moments, it's really important to acknowledge your feelings, but also to take a step back and look at what the facts of that situation might actually be, because they might be very different. Another thing that I think I've mentioned in other episodes, both my GP and therapist have told me, and it drives me nuts. Being kinder to ourselves. I think we are the world's worst critic. If we treated other people the way we treated ourselves, I think we would be very lonely, because I think you'll find that you treat yourself the worst out of everyone in your life. So being kind to yourself, giving yourself grace, and instead of always asking, what is wrong with me, just be a little bit curious. Again, that's another thing my therapist says. I think once we get curious and we start digging to find out what our brain and body are actually telling us, we can find a lot of answers there. But for now, I'm just going to dive into some examples to see if you kind of relate. I think one of the biggest examples I could probably use is how we experience feedback, right? And this is something that happens every single day, whether it's in our job or it's at home or just anywhere, you know? For example, if you just forget to do one small thing and someone says, hey, can you remember to do X, Y, and Z next time? Chances are your brain is automatically going to jump to the worst, and it's going to say things like, you should have known better. Why didn't you do this? You're not good enough. You failed. All the terrible negative things that we think. And all of a sudden, the situation goes from someone just giving us information to our brain turning it into information about how we are as a person. Do you see how quickly that happens? And why it's so important to make that distinction between the two of them? And again, this is not easy. I still have situations every single day where I can just be devastated by the smallest thing. And I try so, so hard to remember these, but it's not always going to be easy every time. I will be honest about that. So, when we are thinking about real life examples, I think a really common one is being left on red. So, this is a spiral that you've probably gone through. And if you haven't, then you probably had a friend go through the same thing. So, when you send someone a message and they leave you on read, your brain spirals into the absolute worst case scenario. And there's probably like 10 logical explanations as to why this person hasn't replied to you, especially if they have ADHD, right? I do this all the time to people where I open their message and forget about it, yet I spiral if someone else has left me on read. That's probably like the number one universal experience that we can relate to here. Another really common one is sort of ruminating for hours later after something's happened. So you could have been in a work meeting or you were at some kind of catch up and you're going over and over the situation hours later, obsessing about when this person changed their tone or their facial expression because you think that that means something negatively about you. Let's be honest here, we are all guilty of doing this. And the next one I'm going to bring up, I know, is also another very universal experience. When somebody sends you a message or an email with no context saying, we need to talk, your brain automatically jumps to worst case scenario. Why do we do that every single time? I mean, I do agree that the person who's saying that should give us a little bit more context because it probably wouldn't turn into such a big thing. But why do we go into the fight or flight response over this one sentence? I know for myself that I have struggled with all of these things for my entire life, and I never had the language for what was happening to me. So now that I know it's actually a thing, it's so validating. So, one of the ways in which I personally experience rejection sensitivity is, funnily enough, in therapy. So, I've been in therapy for a while now, and we sort of are doing a lot of relational therapy. So, this has actually come up as one of the really big parts of the work. It's not always fun to work through, I tell you. I am constantly worried that I'm in trouble, and not just in therapy. I think when I'm at work, and it doesn't matter if I've had the most amazing feedback, I'm constantly waiting to get in trouble around the corner. It's a really hard feeling to explain, but I just feel like every single day I'm walking on eggshells just waiting to get in trouble for something. It's almost like I can be having a great time, but I just know that around the corner something's coming, you know? I get this with work a lot. I just have the worst imposter syndrome ever. And again, I've had amazing feedback from people, but if I get one slight criticism or if I feel the vibes are off, I will spiral heavily. I think I actually mentioned this in another podcast episode where this impacted me so much when I first became a teacher because I had a situation. I got some feedback that actually ended up being not about me at all, but this person had kind of deflected their own situation onto me. And anyway, I wasn't in trouble. Nothing major happened. I wasn't being fired. Like nothing major in the grand scheme of things. It was very small, but I couldn't cope with that emotion, and that turned into me trying to harm myself, and I always wondered, like, what on earth is wrong with me? Why do I have to feel these things so intensely? But now I understand that it's my brain and the way it processes emotions. So if you've had similar situations, just know that you're not alone at all. I also experience this a lot with my own business. So I run my own business selling secondhand children's goods, but I am also starting a waste consultancy for early childhood. So I put up new items every single week on my website, and I'm constantly questioning whether what I'm selling it for is right. And most of the time, I put the price down. I just doubt everything. And with my waste consultancy, I'm still in the process of starting it. And I constantly wonder, why would anybody want expertise from me? Same with all the other creative things that I'm doing at the moment. And while those things might not necessarily be an example of rejection sensitivity itself, it can be a good example of showing how situations can turn really personal. So it's good to kind of separate the two. But I definitely have a long standing history with relationships, any relationships, friendships, and abandonment. So I'm always just constantly worrying that if I do something wrong or a change in someone's behavior means that they're going to leave me and I will be abandoned, which is another thing that I believe is also very, very common. So for me, I'd say that rejection sensitivity probably shows up mostly in relationships, but also work, because that is the one place that I really struggle with it. Yeah, now that I've started trying to explain some personal examples, I feel like it's really hard to actually get my point across. If you have any of these experiences yourself, I would love if you left a comment as well, because I think that would be helpful for so many people just to know that they're not alone. And I know that this was a bit of a shorter episode, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. And I hope it sort of helped you find some explanations for things that you might struggle with and also validate, what you're feeling and what you're going through. Just please, please know that you are not alone. There are so many of us out here that have spent so many years wondering why things just feel harder. So you're definitely not alone. Thank you so, so much for listening to That AuDHD Teacher. If you are not already, please jump on your favorite streaming platform and follow That AuDHD Teacher. But also please jump on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok and follow me at That AuDHD Teacher. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and I'll see you in the next one.